Well, definitely, yes. Light is the fifth dimension, as Paul puts it, but within the spectrum of lighting design, today I'm actually going to talk about a very small sliver of that spectrum, which is wellness. So yeah, my name is Maria Dautant, and I work for HLB Lighting Design as a senior associate. HLB Lighting Design is a company that is international, and at this point we have over 50 years experience in designing spaces and bringing good lighting design into our everyday architecture. I am also the local coordinator for the International Association of Lighting Design, which is an association that advocates for lighting designer in the construction industry, as well as promoting the importance of lighting design in the construction industry. So for some people, wellness is actually a buzzword. And I've heard that many times over and over again. But I really hope that by the end of this presentation, you start thinking of wellness as a reality that we need to start paying attention to in architecture. So a little bit about what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about why is light important. And then we will move on to how quality lighting can promote wellness and well-being within architecture. And finally, I'm going to show you 3 examples of projects that we have designed where we have applied trends in lighting that are meant to promote wellness. So when we talk about wellness, our minds usually go to places like these, right? A spa somewhere in a very exotic location, or maybe a resort where we can go and de-stress and relax before we come back to our job and get stressed again, right? But when we talk about wellness, we should actually be thinking about every single type of space where we spend time in. Our offices, our libraries, our schools, our hospitals. And the reason why I say this, and this is where I'm going to give you the first statistic of this presentation, is because surprisingly, we spend a whole lot of time in indoor spaces. A worldwide statistic says that we spend 90% of our time indoors. So logic says that if we spend so much time indoors, then we should be designing spaces that promote our well-being. But that is expensive. So what is the motivation to actually do this? And here's where I'm going to hit you with a bunch of statistics. So bear with me. Actually, worldwide, doctors are starting to get a little bit concerned because cancer statistics are actually on the rise. I don't know if you know about this, but it's quite shocking. So the first statistic is 84% of people in the Middle East suffer from vitamin D deficiency. This shouldn't come as a surprise, but the reality is that high levels of vitamin D are linked with lower levels of cancer incidence. So there goes the first statistic. Actually, also worldwide, we're seeing an 80% increase in early onset cancer in people under 50 years old. And this has been happening since the 1990s. So we used to think that cancer was a disease of the old age, but now we're actually seeing that younger and younger people are getting cancer. And even more concerning is that from 2019 to 2030, we expect to see this trend grow by 30%. Now, along with our physical health, our mental health is also suffering. And again, worldwide statistics, 30% of adults will actually experience a mental health problem throughout their lives. This is expected to happen more and more often. And 14% of deaths worldwide can be attributable to mental health issues. Even more shocking, in high-income countries, 35 to 50% of people that suffer from mental health do not get any treatment. And in low-income countries, actually this number rises to 80%. So as you can see, we are not getting healthier. We, in fact, are getting sicker. So when People have asked doctors, why is this happening? They don't really have a straight answer, and they, at this point, think that there are many possible causes to this. And surprisingly, when I read an article about this, a number of these causes were related to lighting. And then it got me thinking, lighting is really important here. Some of the causes that they have been quoting include disruption in sleep-wake cycle, which, as you know, is dependent on light. Vitamin D deficiency, as we mentioned already, that would be linked to cancer. Decrease in daily sunlight exposure is also a big problem that we have. An increase in screen time, and as you know, depending on what kind of content we are looking at, can really affect our mental health. And increase in blue light exposure, which in fact is not necessarily related to our screens, but we are seeing that more and more sources of light have a very high content of blue light. So let's ask the question, why is light important? Well, it turns out that our eyes are not only there for us to be able to see. It turns out that there are a number of receptors in our eyes that actually control a very important part of our system, which is the circadian rhythm. So when light enters the eye, it activates the circadian rhythm, and our circadian rhythm handles a whole lot of things. It tells us when we're supposed to eat, what kind of activities we can be doing, and it controls our sleep and wake cycles. It actually controls our mood. It controls our cognitive function, it controls our body temperature and our metabolism, and it can even have an influence in our cardiovascular system. So having trouble with our circadian rhythm means big, big trouble. So then the question is, well, okay, so let's just put some lights in, right? But isn't light just light? Actually, no. When we break it down, we start to realize that lighting is different depending on the source. So as we all know, all the colors of the rainbow put together create white light, right? So when we actually look at the different types of lights out there, we will see the difference between them. So we can't really see it with our eyes, but when you look at the spectrum, you can see the difference. Daylight, for example, has a whole lot of all colors, and in a big measure. And during noontime, which is what we see here, we actually see that it has a lot of blue content, but it's a very particular blue. It's 480 nanometers, which is a light kind of blue. Incandescent lights and halogen lights were the lights that we used to have, right? And as you can see, they have a very smooth spectrum, and yes, sure, more of some colors than others, which can actually be beneficial in nighttime environments, especially having lots of reds. But when you start seeing fluorescent lights and LED lights, then you start noticing where these lack. The fluorescent light has a bunch of peaks at different colors, and maybe that's why we all feel so crappy under fluorescent light. And cool LED and warm white LED, as you can see, they have ups and downs, and they actually lack in many of the colors that we need and we can get from daylight. So it's very important that we understand that not every light is the same. And in general terms, there's nothing that equates daylight. So, after talking about all of this, how quality lighting promotes wellness? Well, on top of picking quality sources that really feed us with a good amount of radiation that is beneficial for us, there are a number of things that we can do to really influence our well-being within a space. So let's start with light quality. There's a number of things that we have been able to identify through science that actually have an effect on us, both our mental health as well as our physical health. So for example, appropriate light levels can enhance abilities to perform tasks. Well, it should not come as a surprise, but not every task needs the same amount of light. So we should always tune the lighting according to the tasks that we need to perform in the space. Light layers can aid in wayfinding and a sense of space. So illuminating ceilings, walls, that can really give us an idea of where we are, and it can make us feel safe and more at ease. The control of lighting is actually very important. So in personal spaces, the unconscious effect of knowing that you can control your light can actually reduce stress. So adding dimming capabilities to our spaces is very important. Sources with high rendition improve people's perception of a space. High rendition means that we can see colors and we can differentiate between them. How many of us have picked a dress or a jacket from our closet, put it on, we think it's black, and then we go into the daylight, it turns out it's navy blue. So obviously, having the ability to differentiate the colors is going to be, again, very important for us. And high-quality drivers, we don't really talk about this a lot, but high-quality drivers and the ones that avoid flicker prevent eye strain, headaches, and even seizures. Some people are more sensible to flicker than others, and sometimes you can't really see it, but you can feel it. For example, kids with autism, they can be very, very sensitive to flicker, so we have to be careful about this. And low glare luminaires prevent stress and discomfort. They can also prevent headaches because having a light that is shining on you the entire time, it can be very, very distressing. So let's also talk about daylight. And I want to make sure that we understand that we have to talk about useful daylight. Whenever we talk about daylight, we're afraid to bring it in because of the power that daylight has. But when we talk about useful daylight, it means daylight that we can control and it contributes to the space. Useful daylight can actually reduce symptoms of depression, help and train our circadian rhythm. It is linked to better performance in office environments, and actually having views of the outside can reduce symptoms of depression and increase productivity. So when we talk about what are the benefits, is that people that work in environments like this can perform better. And that is an actual monetary benefit. And finally, something that doesn't quite go along with lighting, but is dependent on lighting, is including or incorporating nature. And earlier, we heard a presentation about biophilia, right? So it is proven that including or incorporating nature into our environments can decrease levels of depression and anxiety as well, can increase attentional capacity, reduces stress, and increases psychological well-being. But please keep in mind that whenever we include plants in our spaces, plants also need lighting, and they need specific kind of lighting. So the last part of my presentation is going to show a few examples of projects that we have designed where we have incorporated many, if not all, of these benefits or these recommendations to then benefit the space according to the needs within each space. And I'm going to start with lighting quality. This is a project where I worked and I designed in New York City. It's a cancer center, and this is the lobby in this cancer center. And the main idea of the lobby was to avoid glare in all its possible ways and incorporate soft lighting because we wanted to avoid people feeling anxious. I mean, can you imagine for a person that has been diagnosed with cancer or is about to be diagnosed with cancer, going into their first appointment can be very stressful and they can feel a lot of anxiety. So the idea of creating this space with organic shapes, soft lighting, is to try to diminish that level of anxiety. And we also applied it in a way that the center of the room has higher light levels because this is where the most activity is going to happen. And when you go into the nooks, is actually a dimmer environment to allow people to get a little bit of respite and feel comforted. Same project on the left. So we applied different types of lighting depending on the needs of every space. And as you can see, again, using reflections or indirect lighting can really create spaces that are soft. They are still meeting light levels, but again, we are trying to create a space where people don't feel stress and they're able to handle their anxiety a little bit. But as I said before, we have to light spaces depending on tasks. So direct lighting can definitely be useful for offices, but we don't always need to have direct lighting. We can use our surfaces to create a bright environment, which also helps understand the space where you're at, right? And create a little bit of a sense of place. And again, understanding that not the same type of lighting is required everywhere. A waiting room can have a lower light level than a medical room, right? Because we don't need to have uniformity throughout all spaces. Again, talking about uniformity, just include variety because our eyes need variety. Otherwise, speaking aesthetically, places will look boring if we apply the same type of lighting. But at the same time, there's no need for it because some areas will require more lighting than others. And in terms of talking about wayfinding, light is a really great tool to create that. Our eyes tend to focus on the brighter spot, so you can use brightness to create a destination or create a path. And as a matter of fact, I'd like to point out that, again, in the Cancer Center, in this area, we applied a color changing strategy to allow the medical staff to be able to avoid the damage or changes in their circadian rhythm. So this corridor that you see here actually changes color from very cool during the day to very warm in the evening. And the intensity of the light also changes so that it helps them entrain their circadian rhythm. Useful daylight. This may seem like an odd place where you would need daylight. This is a courtroom in Los Angeles in the United States. But in fact, it changes the tone of the space. You wouldn't expect a courtroom to be so bright and open, but it really comes with an advantage, and that is, number one, we save energy. Number two, the jury will be able to see the person that is being accused and everybody in the courtroom in real clarity. Right? You're not relying on a lot of electric lighting, and you're not relying on electric lighting that comes from the top and creates some very weird shadows. But now you have an open space that has daylight coming in and using all the space to reflect that daylight and create an open space that doesn't feel fearful. Also, take a look at the windows at the back. We have louvers there that control the amount of direct sunlight that comes into the space. But at the same time, it allows a view outside. So when you control daylight, it doesn't mean that you're blocking it. It means that we want to let the useful type of daylight into our space so that we can control it. Talking again about daylight, there are many ways in which we can let it in, either from the top, through skylights, or through windows. And in that case, we definitely want to add shades to it. But again, shades don't have to block daylight in full. We can have a certain level of transparency that will still allow you to look outside and have that connection with the exterior, and still having that daylight come through your window. Views of the outside, again, very important, especially for our mental health. The way that we organize our interior spaces becomes critical so that everybody has at least a little bit of a possibility of having a view into the outside. In open offices, this is very common, especially when you have very large windows like these. But we have to think about the possibility of giving people that aren't in these spaces the possibility of look outside, at least for a small amount of time during their day. And even in places where we don't think this is possible, like medical facility, it's actually important that we understand that these spaces can feel very, very menacing, right? I mean, a person is going into this MRI room, they don't know what's wrong with themselves. If they are stressed, if they feel anxious, that's going to work against their health. So by bringing daylight in, allowing them to look into the exterior, it calms them and it will work in favor of their health. And in terms of controlling daylight, we can also think about tinting glass. That is also a possibility. so that we can have illumination coming in, but not necessarily the heat that comes with daylight. And finally, incorporating nature, right? Green walls are a great way to do this, but green walls are expensive. And also, green walls also need daylight, or at least a good amount of lighting so that the plants can stay alive. Green walls also require a lot of coordination, right? I mean, there's irrigation and there's a bunch of other stuff that we have to keep in mind. But still, it's worth considering because it's not only the biophilic aspect to it, but aesthetically is actually a very nice addition to the project. But there are other ways in which we can bring plants into the space, and it's just about placing them, right? We can even have them in chandeliers, as is becoming a trend now. But take a look at the fact that we did add lighting in addition to the daylight that comes into the space to make sure that the plants will grow, or at least will stay alive, because plants also need lighting. So, the takeaways. Lighting is the main driver of the visual and the circadian rhythm. So we need to keep in mind that we all need light, and good light for that matter, to keep ourselves healthy by keeping our circadian rhythm in line. Quality lighting design and useful daylight can lead to spaces that promote wellness and well-being. So as we saw, there are many ways in which we can utilize lighting to help us control our mood, lower our stress, lower our levels of anxiety, etc. So let's start thinking about how we can bring lighting to help us be healthier in a space. And lastly, exposure to natural elements and views of the outside can have positive benefits in our mental health. So let's try to incorporate more views into the exterior area so that we don't lose that connection with the exterior world. And I'd like to say that in this summit, we have talked a lot about building in other worlds and building in the moon. And I really think that before we get to that point, we need to understand how we can build here in Earth and create spaces that will promote our wellness and our well-being before we can start even thinking about building something in the moon or Mars or anywhere else. So thank you.
Maria, thank you ever so much.